friends, and welcome to the Co-Regulated Canines podcast. I'm Ashley Cipoletti, your host, and I'm on a mission to create more connection. Dogs are really just the starting point. Together, we'll explore how to live with more harmony, ease, and healing so we can show up more as the best version of ourselves, not just for our dogs, but also for our community and our planet too. So grab a coffee and let's dive in. Hello, everybody, and welcome to another episode of the Co-Regulated Canines podcast. Today, we're going to do a different topic than we normally do. I'm going to give you a juicy training tip of the day, and you'll have to let me know if you like it and want more of this type of content. But I get asked all the time as a trainer, how do I get my dog to stop jumping? So I figured, let's dive into this since I actually just came back with a client who we were working on this very thing. So before we dive into all that, I want to talk about why do dogs jump in the first place? Because before we do any type of training plan or try to change behavior, it's really, really good to understand to the best of our ability why dogs do a behavior or why anyone does. Because it's like, who are we to be like, it should be the way I want and screw you? No, we need to have some empathy and understanding of where they're coming from. So for dogs, typically they jump up because, especially if they're jumping up and excited to greet a guest, typically it's because they want more information, they want to say hi, they want to connect, and they've practiced it a really, really long time since they were born. And so if we think about little tiny baby puppies, as they're walking around, exploring the world around them, they crawl on things. They kind of jump up on their back legs. They sniff, they investigate, and usually they're jumping up on each other. They're jumping up on gates. They're jumping up on obstacles. They jump up on their mom. They get to milk faster this way. They get to understand the world around them faster this way. And they get to usually say hi to people. So if people are coming in and these little babies are behind a pen with their mom and they're old enough to like open their eyes and really start exploring, people tend to reach into pens. They stand on the outside, they're reaching in, and the little puppies are going to come up curious as all hell, trying to figure out, what are these giant hands? What do they mean? And our hands are very stinky and smelly and usually mean that something is coming, whether that's being touched, being fed, having somebody do something terrible to you. Usually that's all coming from hands. So lots of little dogs or the puppies are jumping up already. So you have to think 99.9% of dogs, before you even take them home, even as puppies, have a learning history of jumping up from their whole lives. And so if they're thinking something's really exciting, they just want to, again, investigate it. There's nothing wrong with that. I love that dogs are curious and are optimistic. And I also understand that jumping up can hurt and it's annoying and you have to explain to grandma and all your guests why your dog is still jumping up and they're 2 years old. So we can have empathy for the human and we can have empathy for the dog, understanding that, hey, they're just really excited. That's kind of a good thing. And they're curious. And so a lot of dogs jump up, get more information about you. What they need to jump up towards is usually towards our face, which is like a nice greeting for dogs. They're like, oh, hi, how are you? Or they're jumping up. They can smell even like your crotch, which sounds disgusting, but they get a lot of information from that. Depending on how tall your dog is, they might jump up to do that or to get your treats or whatever it might be. Some dogs love being pet and they're like, oh, I just can't help myself. If I jump up towards you, they get being pet faster. They get being touched faster because they're closing the gap of how long it takes for you to bend down to touch a dog if they love that. So they're like, if I jump up, I'm already halfway there or 3/4 the way there. So usually that's why. And you tend to see little dogs jump up way more, because, well, they're shorter. So you have to think like a little dog, if we're thinking about the time it takes, if they truly love that connection, for them to get to greet you and get to interact with you, it's like you have way more time from the point of excitement to the point of contact with a little dog versus a dog you barely have to bend over to touch at all. So they are going to be like, oh, I just can't help myself, and do it. And then that gets reinforced because they get that interaction. They get to be touched. Amazing. Also, it doesn't hurt that bad for most little dogs when they jump on you. So generally speaking, most people don't do anything about it for a long time. And most strangers that are interacting with them don't get upset really either. So people aren't like as on it of like, oh God, they need to know that's not okay. Where when big dogs do it, usually they're like, ooh, like this is a problem. They're going to hurt someone, scare someone. That's like a hell no. And again, big dogs, they're higher up on the ground, so it doesn't take them as long to get that physical contact if they're truly excited to greet. Also, big dogs generally are more prone to hip dysplasia or general back pain, where jumping up can actually add more stress on their joints. Not to say that little dogs don't have that, but you just see a much higher trend in the big dogs. So now that we have that background information going into it, it can just help us with our patience and our understanding, which is really important in a relationship, really any relationship we're in, even with people, but also if we're trying to change the natural behavior of another being, in this case, our dogs, we need to have that big picture understanding of why that natural behavior is there. And anytime you're trying to change something that is not their default, not their natural, you need to understand that if you are not on it with either what we call management or like prevention or actively doing training sessions beforehand, or actively, I don't recommend this, but actively trying to make it really unpleasant when they do the thing and or really pleasant when they do the alternative behavior you're teaching. It's like you have to understand if you're not actively training or managing or preventing, that behavior will pop up no matter what. Like there's no ifs, ands, or buts about it. If you know your dog jumps up on guests because they're excited and they love meeting people, here's what I generally recommend. First, you're going to let your guests know beforehand. You can shoot them a text if they text or give them a call and let them know the general size of your dog, breed type, age, if they're not familiar, maybe even send them a picture and say, hey, they get really excited greeting people and they jump and it can hurt. So I wanted to give you a heads up that this might happen when you come over. Are you comfortable with that and with dogs doing that behavior? Are you not? And if not, I'll kind of coach you through what we can expect, but I just wanted to give you a heads up. That can be huge because you're giving people a heads up and the ability to say, I'm actually not comfortable with dogs. I'm scared of dogs. I'll just meet you outside. Like depending on the context of your interaction, you might not even need your guest to come in. Maybe you could just leave your dog at home, and you go out with your guests. That's cool. Other times, maybe you could have gates up. Like it kind of depends on the setup of your home and the context of your hangout and who's coming over. But let them know. I think that's a good general rule of thumb. If your dog jumps, just let your guests know beforehand. Some people got nice clothes. They don't really want that ripped. And if you have a guest coming over and your dog jumps, it would be really cool and kind if you made sure your dog's paws weren't really disgusting and that their nails weren't like crazy long. That would just be really nice common courtesy to have. Now, depending on your training goals, your dog and your friend, you kind of have a limited amount of options. One is you either then let it happen. The dog's going to jump on the guest. If the guest consented to that and is like, that's cool, I love dogs, no big deal, they're going to reinforce your dog for jumping up if you just do nothing and let it happen. It's going to be this big love fest, and that's not the end of the world. I know, like coming from a dog trainer, everyone thinks like, oh my God, you probably care so much about this type of stuff. I'm like, I actually really don't. But if it bothers you or bothers your guest or is bothering the dog, we need to do something about that, right? So if nobody cares, that's cool. Then it's just, understanding that you just reinforce the dog for jumping up again, but they've already been reinforced 800 times before you. Or you could put a gate up. So your dog is on one side of the gate, the guest is on the other. Let your guests come in, you say hi, you hug them. The drama around the door, is decreased because the dog's a little farther away. Have your guests sit down and kind of get comfortable and put your dog on a leash, have some treats on you so you have some kind of insurance, I call it, of their behavior. You can help them out in a way that's not getting physical. And then have your dog just walk up to the guest, have your guest be calm, and you can treat the dog while the guest is greeting them. So the dog is less likely to jump up towards the guest's face. And again, just really emphasizing the guest being calm can help. And then if the initial excitement's out of the way and your dog starts to act a little more normal, maybe you just have the leash dragging in the room. So if you need to step in and remove the dog, you can pick the leash up and do that. Or you could teach your dog beforehand through setting up strategic training lessons and practicing a lot. So the time for training is seldom in the moment. It's almost always beforehand. Or you need to adjust your expectations if you're training in the moment and be like, this just might be too hard for them and is not realistic. If they're too excited, don't have the skill set, and you don't have the patience. To set up a lesson strategically, there are dozens and dozens of ways you can teach this. Some people will say you can teach your dog a default sit. That kind of looks like you just reward your dog for sitting all of the time. If your dog comes up to you, you say sit. They put their butt on the ground. Yes, treat. Your dog comes up to you, sit. Yes, treat, for them doing it over and over and over again. So the dog starts to just default to, I walk up to people and I sit. That's one way. You can also, if you have a dog that is slipping and sliding, or if they just like hesitate with the sit, I sometimes will just treat them for standing. So I don't ask them to do anything, but I notice the moment they haven't jumped and I go, yes, treat, yes, treat. So it's almost like a default standing behavior, which feels silly, but it's kind of what you want. And then I try to think about what are all these moments that the dog is like wanting to jump up, and that being the moment that you mark and reinforce them for not jumping. Or that being the moment you cue them to sit. So it could look like they look at you with these big wide eyes and these loose bodies, and they're like making eye contact with you, coming up to you. That is the precursor to them jumping. So that would be when I would say, yes, treat on the ground, or sit, yes, treat. Another time is once they're near you and they're excited. It's usually for like 3 to 5 seconds. They want to keep jumping up. So I would be like, sit and keep sitting, or I'm going to ask you to sit again, or yes, treat, yes, treat, yes, treat, for them having all their 4 paws on the ground. And then once they have the hang of that, you can kind of slow down how often you're yes and treating. Maybe once the dog looks a little calmer, I'm just really looking at their body language and looking at when it feels like they're getting more animated and excited. And then that's when I'm like, oh, yes, treat, to bring it back down, and playing around with the timing of like, can we just taper down a little bit here? Or do we need to still do a lot of high reps of the yes, treat, because they're just too excited. And then thinking of, okay, when you go from being still to walking, that is another like trigger for jumping. So then I'd want to be ready to go, yes, treat, yes, treat, yes, treat, as you walk away. And then thinking about when treats end is a big one for when they're like, oh my gosh, and sometimes fall apart. So I would anticipate that, and again, not get frustrated, but understand it's common that it happens. And they're either just going to get a little frustrated or a little excited when the treats end if they don't know an all done cue and what that means. So what I do if the jumping does still persist, even when I'm in a little training session, I'm just calm. I'm very calm about it. I try to be pretty boring. They jump up on me, I'm not touching them. If the dog's like fixating and they're like getting really, really like, I don't know, mouthy or something, and I'm sitting down, I might sometimes calmly guide them to be on the ground, and almost like as my defense of protecting my face. Like I have a little bit of a gentle stiff arm of being like, okay, like you're here. I know you're going to pop up towards my face when you stare at me a little bit. And then I might think to just stand up, and again, get ready. When you stand up, they're likely to jump there. And this is again, coming from their entire learning history before you, practicing this behavior. So patience matters. And the more and more that you practice and get really aware of all these times they're thinking about jumping, thinking about being excited and don't, and you acknowledge that and reinforce it with either your attention, your touch, or treats, depending on the dog you're working with, over time, it starts to feed into this new bucket of new behaviors and a new skill when excited. But you have to know when you first start changing a behavior or teaching a skill, it's not a groove in the brain yet. It's not a deep one. You're making new neural pathways, like literally. So if they have a really deep neural pathway of jumping when excited, the depth of that's like the ocean. You just teach a new skill in one training session. That's like a trickling rainfall, like a drizzle. And they're like in their brain going, which behavior do they pick in this scenario? It's like the water's going to go down the deep river groove, so to speak, or the deep ocean groove, versus the little like trickle. Like it's more likely that it's going to go there. So you have to think, how do we make that little trickle deeper and deeper and deeper? That is by practicing and practicing and practicing and practicing. And even then, when you practice a lot, you still have to consider that deep groove of a behavior is still there. It was still reinforced for like their whole life prior. So I hope this gives you a little more patience when working with your dog and understanding of why jumping is one of those tricky behaviors that can feel like it's taking longer than you would expect to see progress from, or perfection, quote unquote, from. And a lot of it, again, is from that really long learning history prior to you ever bringing them home. And anytime we're changing any type of habit, I hope that you can think back to that metaphor of the deep neural pathway in their brain, right? Where that's a really deep groove, as if it's like the Grand Canyon, and any new behavior you're trying to form or shape or teach in that same context begins as a little raindrop. So in order to become like the Grand Canyon, it would require lots and lots of water to create that groove in the brain. And the water in this metaphor is training practice. So if you're lazy, prevention and management, or adjusting your expectations. And if you're particular and you're like, nope, I want this, then put in the reps and stop blaming your dog for being a dog. Thank you. And on an unrelated note, I just wanted to share that I feel for so many of you that are living with dogs with reactivity, because it can feel like every time you leave your house is like all these mini bombs going off, or it can just be really jarring to your nervous system because it feels like you can't even walk 300 feet without running into a dog, and then having these really big dramatic events that can feel scary, can feel confusing, can feel embarrassing. Like, I feel for you. And some of us live in environments where it's much easier to live with a reactive dog. And some of us live in environments where it's really challenging or even unsafe because you have to go in an elevator to leave the building. And every time the door opens, bing, there could be a dog right there. I don't like leaving my people without something tangible to ease stress or ease frustration. That's what I'm all about, is like, how can we make your life a little bit easier? So if you're living with a reactive dog and you're finding like these walks are just jarring to your nervous system, one, I see you. Two, I have something to help you that is totally free and doesn't really require anything from you at all except clicking a button and putting in, I think, your email and info so I can send it to you. And this is a free guide that will walk you through my step-by-step process on how to stay calm when your dog is losing it. And this can be used even if you're working with another trainer, even if you're not working with a trainer, and you're just like, how the heck do I get through this? Or even if you've worked with me one-on-one, this guide is still helpful because I included some tips in there that I don't actually go over with private clients. And some of that's more on the emotional regulation side of humans. So this will walk you through even like these breathing strategies that first responders do to help them actually perform better in crises. And it's what I do, and it actually can even improve your workouts. I'm a little bit of a gym junkie, if you know me. And also walking you through what to do in the heat of the moment and how to plan and map out your walking route. And then lastly, it will also go over like how to recover from these moments. And ideally where these big, large reactions are happening less frequently and they're less intense, and you are ruminating or spiraling less often and more able to think proactively instead of also be reacting from a stressed out nervous system. So that was a mouthful, but I'm going to include the link to get that sent to you in the show notes if you're interested. Again, it's called How to Stay Calm When Your Dog is Losing It. It's totally free. It's my gift to you. And if you read through it and have any suggestions, email me, let me know. I love to hear from you, love to tweak things, and I love to make the best types of products and information and content out there for my audience because I love you guys. All right, well, till next time. Thanks for hanging out with me on the Co-Regulated Canines podcast. If you love this episode, it would mean the world to me if you subscribed, left a review, and shared with a friend. Your support helps more people and their dogs find a little more ease and connection in their lives. Want to dive deeper? Follow me on Instagram at Co-Regulated Canines. That's CO_regulated, the letter K, the number 9, S, or head to www.coregulatedcanines.com for more resources. Until next time, take care of yourself, take care of your pup, and keep building those connections.